Great. Well, you can bump us onto the next slide, Matt, and I will say hello and welcome to everyone. This is the second show and tell, and we will be hearing from 8 local authorities today who've been part of this development management software Pathfinder program. Next slide. So we've got 2 hours. We probably won't use all of that. We haven't in the past. I want to give a very brief introduction to Pathfinders. We're then going to open the floor to the 8 councils to let them talk through their show and tells. If you have a burning question for any of the councils that you hear, you can ask that immediately after their show and tell. If it's something that can wait till the end, we'll sort of open things up for a more broad Q&A. But absolutely, if it's something that's burning, please don't feel shy to speak up after the show and tell. I'll try and make some space for that. At the end, we'll have some discussion, and yes, we will probably finish well on time. Okay, next slide. So the purpose of these Pathfinder projects was for local planning authorities to explore ways to enhance their planning software in collaboration with existing software providers. And next slide. The vision here was for a new, more modular software landscape to encourage digital innovation and provide access to underlying data. This will help automate routine processes, supporting faster and more certain decision making. Next slide. So 8 councils took part in this. Part in this. Actually, I'm just going to mute someone, and just everyone else, just be mindful of being on mute if you can. That would be great. So 8 projects scattered around the UK. We grouped them into themes, and so we had making better use of planning application data. 4 councils got through under that theme, and then 2 on the improving publication of planning data, and 2 on sharing of reusable components or practices. The order that you see here is the order that councils will be speaking. So Colchester, I hope you're ready. You'll be up in a couple of minutes. All right, next slide. So the Pathfinders really have been about taking a collaborative approach to delivery. So working in blended teams, this can often include people from IT, from the projects team, people working on the front line in the planning teams, working through problems, regular dialogue to generate a deeper understanding of the needs of users. The really tight timeframes that we're working to here put a real emphasis on learning and iterating. There wasn't a lot of time to scope requirements or go into detailed investigation of solutions. This really is about getting some work done very quickly and getting the learnings captured. We've been inviting people to follow the principles of the local digital declaration. This really means putting user needs first, working in the open, which is what we're doing today. Also, we share blogs, we share videos, and we'll have another one of these, a final showcase on the 26th of April. So put that in the calendar. And making sure that we share reusable outputs. So it's not just useful for one council, it's potentially useful for more councils. Next slide, Matt. All right, so Colchester, if you want to turn your camera on, if you want, introduce yourself and dive on into the project. And just, I think Matt will hold off until you say next slide.
Okie doke. Hello, everyone. My name is Catherine Eller from NEC Software Solutions. Just whilst we're on this first slide, I just want to do a quick recap of where we've got to. So last time we talked very much about starting the planning application from a map and the possible routes that an inexperienced householder applicant might take from there, whether that be needing advice about whether they needed planning permission at all, or starting the planning application process. So since then, we've had a call with PlanX to see if that's feasible to link to that as one of the routes. And we've also been looking at whether the information that we've gleaned from where someone has started on that planning application is enough to automate any of the planning decisions. But this time we'd like to update you on our most recent workshop, and you won't be hearing from me this time. I'm going to hand over to Lucy Mondon, who's planning manager at Colchester Borough Council, and she's going to take us through the latest work. Okay, over to you, Lucy.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Going to the first slide. Thank you. Yes, so we've been talking about automation, and in particular auto validation for householder applications, which is quite useful because householder applications are a very large bulk of the work that comes into us, but they have quite straightforward validation requirements for the level of information that's required for the application. So we've been looking at the user and how they can have a clearer and more intuitive process into making an application or researching their site that they're looking at, because householder applications are not always submitted by professional agents or architects. They're quite often submitted by the applicants themselves. So it's useful to make the process as straightforward as possible. We've talked about photo quality validation, which I'll talk about a bit more in the next couple of slides, but looking to see if software could improve the validation process in terms of actually validating plans and documentation that's submitted, similar to how it works for passport recognition, etc. And then we've also talked about the possibility of a chatbot, which CBC uses currently for its recycling and waste department, which works quite well. I think for planning, queries and questions can be quite complicated. They're quite often site specific, so a chatbot would be useful for simple queries in the first instance, so more like an advanced FAQ system, or signposting people to where we need them as a service to go next, so another area to self-serve, for example, or directing them to somebody they need to speak to. And there is a direct link there between getting the user to make a robust submission in the first instance, and then they can get a much quicker decision, because with householder applications there's only 8 weeks to determine, and quite often a large chunk of that can be taken up with delays in terms of admin or trying to get the correct information in from applicants. Next slide, please. This is an example of some of the plans that we get submitted, and these do sometimes reach the planning officer because they've already been validated and registered in this state. So you can see the plan is quite faint. Quite often applicants will draw their own plans, or they're using old plans from an old building regulations drawing or something, which can be fine, but quite often it's difficult to see what's actually being proposed. They're not particularly clear. There's no scale or no scale bar. So to have something that could recognise that and identify that a scale bar is required, for example, or that the resolution is correct, that would be useful. Quite often we have cases where somebody has received an A1 printout of a plan, and because they don't have the scanning facilities to scan the plan, they don't have a digital version, they sometimes lay it out on the floor, take a photograph of it and submit that for the planning application, which is then very difficult to use because the scale's all out. The folds and bumps from folding the plan means that the plan is distorted, so they're very difficult to use. And the added downside of that is that once you get the corrected information in, you may then have to reconsult various people, which means that you're already eating even more into that 8-week timescale, which is frustrating for everybody. Next slide. This is another example of it's an extract from a historic building record that was submitted for a condition. It was a curtilage listed building that was being converted to residential, so it was necessary to have a record of all the historic features prior to conversion, but the photographs were of such low resolution that you couldn't really see the detail that was meant to be recorded, so it essentially would render the document useless, really. So a method to identify resolution and clarity of submissions would be incredibly useful, and it would save time in terms of going back to agents and asking them to resubmit documents and then having to reconsult again. Next slide. So as I said, this is quite useful to introduce this in terms of householder applications because they are the highest volume application. They're quite cost inefficient, really, because they come in with a low fee generation but can be incredibly time consuming. But there are other knock-on benefits from dealing with just those few validation methods and automation, because they would enable officers to actually hit the ground running and deal with the application much swifter because they've got all the information they need. It allows customers and local residents, interested parties, to understand exactly what's going on with the application at an early stage, and it would enable the planning officer then to deal with the application in hand rather than dealing with admin and procedural matters, so they can achieve some betterment to schemes and get revisions and improve design, which the government is placing a lot of emphasis on at the moment. They can also free up some capacity to then deal with the larger applications, which have far more wider reaching impacts, public impacts, and would allow for focus on certain aspects of the job which perhaps take a bit of a sideline, such as post-build audit. So making sure that these developments are being built in accordance with approvals, which would save time enforcement-wise as well. Additional benefits is that the planning officers that tend to deal with the householders are at the early stages in their career, and any freedom in terms of capacity would enable them to potentially start dealing with some of the more complex applications, which would enhance their learning, training and skills development, which would be of benefit. And also, in using this resource in a much more efficient way, would give greater resilience to the service, in that you have a certain amount of flexibility to cope with staff sickness, for example, or appeal work that comes in, which can be incredibly time consuming and isn't fee generating. It allows you to have the ability to deal with those scenarios whilst not letting the rest of your work diminish. So it's, as it says on the slide, driving out waste and cost. Next slide. So, as I mentioned, households are very costly to process, given the relatively low fee income. So the opportunities for automation in terms of validation would certainly help save considerable time and therefore increase cost savings. We also then started to talk about possibilities for automation of determination to a certain degree. I don't think that's not necessarily relevant to householder applications, but it would certainly be for applications that are more criteria based or rule based, so lawful development certificates or prior approvals that are relying on the criteria in the permitted development rights legislation. So it could look towards determination or getting an application to a point where an officer then has to become involved and make a judgment. Next slide. So essentially, we were looking at efficiency and identifying how to use a scarce resource in the most appropriate way. So the strategies for automation and self-service we consider to liberate that resource in a very productive way. I think I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Thanks, Lucy, and thanks, Catherine. Next up, we've got Harrow. So thank you to Colchester for staying on time. And with Harrow and everyone else, I'll give a little wave at the 8-minute mark, just so you know you'll need to start, thinking about wrapping up. For Harrow, I've got a little apology. You'll see that some of these slides have been formatted slightly dodgy. We got council slides on 3x4 and tried to make them 6x9. Harrow is where I've done the worst job, so apologies.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for that introduction there. Yes, so just if we just go to the first slide, and then I'll just do a very quick recap on what the project is about for anyone new joining today. So the project that we're doing here is the consultee comment processing, and it's looking to address the inefficiencies we have in that and look at the technology and our internal processes and how we can improve that. So that's just a very brief recap on what we're doing. So if you want to go to the next slide. So our achievements to date so far, we've done 2 workshops. We've done an initial one to review the first part of the consultee process, which is the customer submission part. And we've just recently done the second part, which is the review of the back office processes. We've been developing the 2B model for the first workshop for the customer submission, and we've also been addressing the pain points associated with those, which we'll have a look at the findings on that now. So if you want to go to the next slide, please. So this is our process for the first part, the customer comment processing. And initially we did have a look at this in the first show and tell, and this was the call outs on this were all the issues or the pain points that we had with each step of the process. So what we've been doing as part of this project is addressing those, and I've just put into these into the call outs the updates on those, on where there is improvement, whether it be technology wise or whether it be process wise. I'm not going to go through each one of these, but I will step through some of the key ones that we had on there. So if you want to go to the next slide, please. So one of the issues that we had feedback on was the customers' ability to search for information. So they were saying that they were finding it difficult to search for the applications that they were interested in. So we've been looking at what can be done to address that, and it was twofold in what we found from our workshop outcomes on that. One was that the technology can provide a really good level of refinement in how we we can put the search together. So customers are able to put quite complex search routines into the system, and then hopefully get to the application they're looking for. So there was a good offering in this solution for that. So we're quite excited about what we can provide for the customers. But also what we found as part of that exercise was that it really comes down to the quality of the information as well that's in the system as well. So an example of that would be if a customer was searching on something like a garage, they would logically type into the system garage and then maybe an address, and hoping to find the solution there, or hoping to find the appropriate application through that kind of search. But what we found was that typically what would be in the back office, that application itself would be set up as a rear extension on there. So the terminology needs to be looked at internally on how we label these things. Another example was if there was something like a mosque that was being or that was being developed in the area, that would be in the system as a new build on high street. So it's really addressing both that, how we can improve that search capability, and then how we improve the quality of the information that we have in the system. So there is some work internally for us to look at how we do that labeling for the data itself in there. If you want to go to the next slide, please. So also one of the things that customers came up with was that they felt they were being left out on what was going on. They didn't feel like they were being notified of the applications in their area. As part of the process of managing an application, there are automated notifications that are sent out to customers, but there is the chance that we may miss some customers on there, and alternatively they may just miss the email on there, and they may not have seen that. But what we can provide as some of the capability in the system is to get them to sign up to notifications, to automate the notifications that they're interested in. So instead of us pushing out a notification or pushing out a specific notification on an application, they can sign up to them as well. So that's another really good way to get that information across to them, and also that's provides less reliance on then searching for information on there. So that was we're quite happy with that being as part of our solution on there. Also in the next slide, there was taking that a kind of step further on there. There was the ability to for the customer to identify key areas where they can do their searching as well, or where they can be notified on an application. So what's interesting about this is that it doesn't necessarily have to be applicable to their own property. So they can put their own address in and then put a sort of a radius area for applications, which are close to their properties. But also, if they had an interest in something like a local playing field or something, something in their area, an area of interest for them, they could actually set up a notification for applications going on in that area. And that also applies to councillors as well, who are interested in their catchment areas. They can put sort of boundary areas in and then be notified of what's going on in the area as well. So that was really, I thought that was above and beyond what we really were looking for. We were looking for some kind of notification to the users, but it kind of, what's the offering there is a lot greater for us really, and that we can expand on that, which was really good. Also, if you want to go to the next slide. The customers were also saying that they felt that they were a little bit or they felt a bit that the whole process was a little bit confusing. They felt a bit daunted by some of the terminology and how the process works and what they were required to do. So what we were looking to do here is to provide some better guidance and better guidance for the customers and information for them. So we felt that if we can put this into the website, this would be really beneficial to them to get the information, for them to understand the terminology, and then also for them to be able to understand what the process is and what is expected of them as well. So that was something that addresses another one of the issues they brought up as well. Okay, and then next slide. So the last point, or the last one of the points I want to bring up on this was on the last show and tell, we identified a kind of negative feedback loop where it was causing a quite a big overhead for our customers, or mostly for our officers, but it was something that the customers brought up as well. They felt that when they were submitting a comment, it was going into a black hole, and they weren't being notified that that it actually had gone anywhere, that anyone was looking at it. So they were resubmitting, and then this was causing an issue where users were, or the customers were resubmitting, or they were doing this resubmission. It was causing problems for the officers who had to reread that information or read through the applications and then delete the ones that were duplicates on there. So it was a very simple solution to this, was to have as part of the offering would be to put a default position in the system that when they do submit a comment on there, they get an automated response back to their application has gone through. So it is a very simple solution, and it was quite a big overhead, or it is quite a big overhead for our officers at this time. So that's something we're kind of looking forward to putting in place. Okay, so next steps, next slide. So what we'll be doing next is we'll be looking at the outcomes of our second workshop, and then developing our back office processes. So addressing the pain points from that side as well. So that will include another kind of negative feedback loop we had with the address matching. So we'll be looking how we can address that solution and what we can put in place to resolve that. We'll also be looking internally at our digital front end options as well. So that will be part and parcel of providing information for customers, and then how the form submission goes, how that works in conjunction with the Assure solution on there. And then hopefully then we'll be able to finalize our end-to-end model of how this will work. Okay, and that's me, unless there's any questions.
Thank you, Mark. I didn't even need to give you an 8-minute wave because I can see you were almost at the end point.
I can do more if you want.
No, it's just perfect. So yes, you're right to remind us of questions. So any burning questions for Mark that you really want to ask now that just can't wait till the end? All right, we will move on to Sevenoaks. And again, I'll just, if you're looking like you've got a few too many slides to go at the 8-minute mark, I'll just give you a little wave.
Okay, thanks, Tim. I've only got a few slides, thank you. Just to recap for newcomers, I'm Evelyn, a team manager in the planning department in Sevenoaks, specifically development management and enforcement in my areas. I've been working on this project with a colleague, Fraser McGregor, in the GIS team, along with other colleagues in the GIS team. And just a recap on the project. So we are exploring and implementing solutions to improve access to tree preservation audit information, and also the process of submitting applications to carry out works to protected trees and trees that are in conservation areas. This project isn't covering works to carry out emergency works to trees, because that's already fairly straightforward. Okay, thank you. Next slide. I think we've really recognised as part of this the demand for access to information by customers, and the ability to submit an application for works to trees, and any type of application really, at a time that suits the customer, and rather than being dictated by our business hours. So we want to create a user-friendly process that can be accessed on demand, and a more efficient way for us to register applications, acknowledge them and respond to them as quickly as possible. Part of this is also designed to build capacity for officers, because I think it's important to make as much information public as possible to reduce the need for unnecessary contact. If customers can access information online, then that obviously saves their time, and it saves our time in responding to requests for information that really should be in the public domain already. We do receive a lot of requests for information about trees and planning constraints in general, and you'll see later that we can provide a link to our interactive map that we have on our website, that we developed a few years ago actually, but we've built on that over the last few years by adding additional layers of information, constraints, basically any planning constraint that you can think of. We've added that to our interactive map, and customers can access information 24/7. We also receive about 1,000 requests a year for information specific to trees. So tree the actual copies of tree preservation orders we are not publishing at the moment, and part of this project is designed to publish TPO information. We hold all that information on our document management system, and we are working with iDocs to make that information public on our interactive map, so customers can go onto the interactive map, click on a TPO, download a copy of the order, and then submit the application from there. All the processes are designed to link from one to the other to make it as seamless as possible. Next slide, thank you. Okay, next slide, thank you. So at the moment, a customer, this process is specific to privately owned trees, so mainly householders, and they usually often they will submit the application or engage a landscaping or tree company to submit the application for them. So at the moment, a customer will identify the need to carry out the work to the tree in their garden, for instance. They will sometimes contact us direct or ask a landscaping company to contact us on their behalf. We will refer them to our map so they can check whether the tree is protected or in a conservation area. If it's in a conservation area, it's fairly straightforward. They can submit a notification to us that they wish to carry out the work. If the tree is protected, then often they will need a copy of the order, and we will need to send that out to them. So that process can be delayed from them contacting us to us actually sending out the information. The aim of this project will be that obviously we'll publish the TPOs online, so they don't need to contact us. They can just download a copy themselves, and then they can make an application. So sometimes this process can take anything from 1 day to a week, just depending on how long it takes for us to respond to their query, or how complicated the query is. Okay, next slide, thank you. So this is a sample of the online form that we've developed, and this has been developed in-house by our GIS team and developers. And once a resident has identified that a tree is protected and downloaded a copy, there'll be a link on our interactive map for them to actually submit the application, and that will take them to our own form that we've developed, and they can fill out the form. The form is quite intuitive in that it will link back to the map, so it will recognise the tree that they've identified, the address, and it will populate the form for them. And they can then, and also the good thing about this form is that they can add multiple trees to the form, so they don't have to submit an application for each form. There's an option to select multiple trees in one address and add them all to the form, and then go through the form, and depending on the answer to one question, will then populate another question. So as I said, it's quite intuitive. It will sort of second guess answers and fill out the next step for them. Okay, next slide, thank you. I'm happy for these links to be added to the chat if anybody's interested in looking at them. So the proposed process really is to identify the need to carry out the work to tree, check our online map, download a copy of the TPO, link to the online form, submit the online form, and then once that online form comes through to us, it will download into our back office system. We use Uniform, we use iDocs, and that is wrapped around by Enterprise. And we also use the Notify service so that the customer, once we've received an application, will automatically be notified by text. So we do that for planning applications anyway. We send, as long as a mobile number is included on the application form, the customer will get text updates throughout the process. And we've been doing that with applications for the last, since 2019. And we just tailor that to the type of application that is submitted, that the customer will get different text updates throughout the process. So where we're at the moment is that we've developed the online form and the connector from the form to our back office system. And as soon as we've got confirmation from iDocs that we will be able to publish the TPOs, all this will go live. So it could be as early as the end of April, early May. Once we've got this up and running, the plan is to replicate this process for other types of applications, so pre-application inquiries, and also our online enforcement reporting process. We do have an online form for both those processes, but we can replicate this process to make those processes more intuitive as well, and more map based, pulling through information from the online map to save time. Okay, thank you.
Thanks for that, Evelyn. All right, so any questions for Evelyn before we move on to Tewkesbury? All right, well, I'll open the floor to Tewkesbury, and again, if I see you're looking like you've got a few too many slides to go at the 8-minute mark, I'll give you a little wave.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, I'm Amy. I'm the Programme Officer at Tewkesbury, so I'm looking at this plan and application tracker. So just a little bit of background, we're looking at creating a plan and application tracker that will sit on our website. Initially, it will be open to applicants and agents so that they are able to track their applications. But we do hope that it would be able to be opened out in time to sort of anybody that has an interest in an application. So far we've worked with the planning team, we've scoped out the requirements of the application tracker and mapped out the planning process to identify the key stages that we're going to display on the tracker. And we've worked with iDocs, who is our supplier, and they have installed a planning connector onto our system now, which we will use to extract the data, and that will be what is displayed on the tracker. So that was installed at the beginning of the month, so we've now worked on testing that does what we were expecting, and it pulls through the right data. So if we move on to the next slide. We've done the initial work around how we think that the planning tracker might look on our website. So as you can see there, you would have a search function, so you can search for the reference number. It gives you a brief information about the application, including the description. And then you can see the bar there that shows the sort of the main points that we've decided to show on the tracker and whereabouts in the process the application is. As I said, this is sort of our initial thoughts, so we will look to work with our planning team and sort of adapt these. We've also shown a bit more information. We've got a map there that's pulled through from the system, and the option to subscribe for updates as well, so they can see when the application get alerted when the application sort of moves through a next stage. We've also linked it through under additional information to public access. So we want this to complement public access, not be a replacement for it. So all of the detailed information about the application is held there, so they're able to view documents and make comments and things like that through public access. So all of that is able for them to just sort of click through to that. We've also got information there about the planning application process. So that links through to our website, where we sort of have detailed information about the process. So that's sort of more aimed at members of the public or maybe applicants that are putting in an application for the first time. So that's sort of what we're thinking there. And then we've got an overview box sort of at what that stage means. So we've sort of put together a few words for the consideration stage, but that will change depending on what stage they're at throughout the process, and we can tailor that so that it sort of displays relevant information. So the idea is that from here they can sort of get as much information as we can give them really about this application, and that in turn will hopefully reduce the impact or reduce the time spent by planning officers giving these updates verbally over the phone or by email when people are asking for updates and things like that. We've included some dates on there so that they can sort of see how long it is until the next stage. We'll put information about that in that box as well, sort of how long we would expect it to stay on this stage and things like that, and all of that will be pulled from Uniform using the planning connector. So that's sort of our initial ideas for that. If you can move to the next slide, please. So now we're sort of into the more technical side of things in terms of this project. So there is some elements of information that we're not able to get from the planning connector. So we are building our own connectors so that it sort of feeds into both to pull through that remaining bit of information. And then the public API that will pull all of the information and display it on the application tracker. So that's sort of the technical elements of the project is what's being worked on now. We'll write templated emails and text messages. We've sort of got a brand architecture that we use for all of these sort of alerts that we send to customers. So we'll sort of tie that in with what we already have currently on our system. And then, yeah, we'll move on to actually sort of building the working tracker once we've got all the sort of technical elements fine-tuned. But that's sort of a whistle-stop tour of where we're at.
Thank you very much. All right, we have a minute for some questions for Amy, if anyone's got any. Matt, oh, we've got a couple of raised hands here. I'll start with Matt because you're an organizer.
Thank you. Sorry, Helen, there'll be time, I promise. It's a quick question. I'm curious, Amy, about what information is remaining that you kind of haven't been able to pull through at the moment.
I think it's more, it's not necessarily for the first stage, it's more if we want to sort of future-proof it, I think. So it's the information that we may want to go on and display later on, or more detailed information. Obviously, the dates and things that display on the tracker we can get from the planning connector. But it's more if we wanted to display consultees and things like that, that information doesn't pull through. So it's that sort of thing.
Good to know. Yeah, exciting that you're thinking further ahead as well. Thanks.
Helen.
Thank you. You've actually just answered part of the question about the consultees, so thank you for that. Also, will it display things like what the target decision date is and whether you're going to have an extension of time, that kind of thing? Because I think sometimes I saw you dot by I think the public interface, I think that looks really, really good, by the way. But you know, will that dot just kind of keep moving and moving and moving sort of further and further to the right as unfortunately things get more delayed, if that's the situation?
Yeah, and that's something that we sort of need to think about, I think, in terms of at the moment we're looking at sort of the more simple applications that we hope wouldn't go through extension of times and things like that. But yes, you know, things like committee decisions and things like that obviously then extend your timeline and you need to display different information for those sort of applications. So it's definitely something that we are looking at, and yeah, we would want it to display everything for those applications. So it would, if an extension of time is requested, then we would add dots in for the extension of time and give an explanation about what that means, and maybe even the reasons why that extension of time was requested. But they're sort of things that we've not really scoped out initially. While we do the first phases, it'll be things that grow as this sort of develops.
Thank you.
That's brilliant. All right, so we are not going to take a little break, just because if we steam through, we can be finished around about past, which is great. We're not going to take a break. We're going to go straight to Nottingham, then Basingstoke, Havering, and North Devon. So take it away, Nottingham.
Good afternoon. I'm Laura, and obviously I'm just going to give you an update on Nottingham's project. Next slide, please. Just a quick reminder of what we're doing. So we're looking at the better use of development management data, both within the planning system for our planners, but also making this data more widely available and reused through a number of different outputs. And just as a reminder again, our DM system is uniform. The next slide, please. So we're in the data phase, as I've called it here. So there's not lots of many pretty outputs today, I'm afraid, but hopefully for the final show and tell there will be a number. Just to say, we've had to reprofile the delivery plan. So some elements we've ended up bringing forwards and others have been slightly delayed. It's just a difficult time of year for a project like this with end of year and sort of illnesses and so forth. So we've got some of our tasks now dual running rather than we initially thought it would be in a very linear fashion. But actually we've now got our enterprise development work running alongside our FME server exploration. But I'll explain this as we go along. Next slide, please. So there's three main elements to our project. Enterprise, so looking at using our development management data by planners within our system. We've got an enterprise development where IDOCs are working with us to expand what enterprise can do, particularly around data exploration and visualization within the system, and also being able to extract data so we can use it elsewhere. And then we have an FME server element where we are providing access and manipulation of the data within the system to be served up elsewhere, so going directly into Uniform rather than using the enterprise module. So if I go through each element in turn, thank you. The enterprise, so where are we? Well, this is going to aid obviously operational performance management information being at the hands of our planners. And whilst it's not new technology and new software, it is new to us. So we didn't have this at the start of the project. So we are already at a stage where we've procured the product and had it implemented within our system. We've been working with IDOCs to implement a number of workflows, tasks and graphs for day-to-day case management and performance management, and also been using it to help with data quality checking and assurance, which I will cover a bit more later. So that element is going really well. We're in the testing phase, so later this week, many of these workflows and reports will be tested with the view to pushing at least some of them live following that meeting. All of the graphs are already live and being used by our planning managers. Next slide, please. So as part of our project, we've tried to focus on PS1 and 2 just to try and give our project a focus. And as part of this, we sort of found some data issues with PS1 and 2. But it's been brilliant because we have these new tools. We've been able to understand the extent of the issues we've got and put in place data quality checks to ensure that all of the data going forwards can't be entered incorrectly into the system, and also to clearly understand the issues. So, for example, the enterprise development will enable us to see a lot of the data issues because we will be able to see the data that underlies the reporting rather than just having a report that comes out of the box. Next slide, please. So the enterprise development itself, this will enable us to share our DM data more widely because we'll be able to extract information and improve our visualizations. So as I've just said, it's going to be helping us with our PS1 and 2 reporting. We've already kind of spoken with IDOCs, and what we have now is kind of reports set up that enable us to do data quality checks, so we can see exactly which records are being used for each of the metrics within PS1 and 2. So it improves that transparency for our planning managers, and also then obviously helps us to publish that information to others and explain it clearly. So we've been working on data extract in many forms, including GeoJSON, which we then hope can be used to publish information openly in our open data offer. IDOCs are really keen to kind of show the developments that they've been doing themselves, so we're hoping that they will form part of our final show and tell presentation. And I guess some of this exploration of the data and pushing it into different outputs, so using the GeoJSON outputs and so forth, leads us on to the final area of development, because we have been exploring the use of FME server, which basically can extract and transform all of our data to basically be used by anything. So in this instance, it could have been used to sanitize our records from enterprise into a form that we're happy to publish to the public, or summaries of that information for other purposes. So this has required an immense amount of modelling. I haven't included the whole model on this slide, but basically we have been modelling all of our data to be able to create, at this point in time, PS1 and 2 outputs. And it's like the final part in the puzzle, really, because it allows us to manipulate the data in so many different ways. We can use it as an extraction tool. We can use it as a publication tool. So it's really, really powerful. We have used this tool previously in a desktop environment for a number of years, but FME server has even greater functionality. One of the things that it has allowed us to do is to let staff that don't have uniform set up to query the data. So as a proof of concept, actually yesterday, we've published an online form internally that enables staff to query the uniform data just using simple parameters. So they can get a PS1 report based on a particular ward for particular dates for a particular officer. Any of those metrics, and out pops the report. So that's now working already. And this obviously could be used for many other different reports, but we focused on the PS1 and 2. So that's one of the key metrics that we've decided to use FME Server for. It's also going to be able to allow us to create ward dashboards using Esri technology and also publish our open data. So I'm hoping obviously all of those things will be part of our final output. So I'm sort of sorry for today that we can't show you all the flashy stuff, but I think in 4 weeks' time, hopefully we'll have lots of exciting things to show you rather than screenshots of data models and so forth. That's from me today.
Thank you very much, Laura. All right. Any burning questions from Laura before we open the floor to Basingstoke and Dean? And we've had a question in the chat about sharing the slides. Matt, have we done that in the past, shared the slides, or just the video?
Yeah, we'll share them both in the email that we send around probably tomorrow, because we need a bit of time to upload it to YouTube at the end of today.
Great. See a question from Nina about loving to know more about the SME server. How do we sort of continue this conversation beyond today?
Yes, thank you for reading that question out. I've been looking at Power BI and I hadn't heard of FME Server before, so I'm looking at it more from a global reporting point of view of getting lots of information out in a much nicer dashboard. And just looking at Laura's infographics she's got there, it looks really exciting. So maybe Laura and I can have another chat after the 4 weeks and explore that a bit further. That would be really, really helpful.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. A lot of our visualizations aren't created in FME, but FME enable them to happen. So I can sort of explain that to you.
That would be cool. And I've also got my colleague Paul Trod on the phone, who's far more technical than I. So perhaps we can have a chat later on, like I say, after you've done your final show and tell. Thanks very much, all.
Fantastic. All right, up next is Basingstoke and Dean. After that, we've got Havering, and then North Devon as the last one.
Okay, thanks for that. I'm Greg Chapman, Assistant Planning Manager at Basingstoke and Dean, and Martin Coles is our project manager for this scheme. So he's going to run through a couple of the slides as well. I'll hand over to him in due course. So I've made quite a lot of progress really since the last show and tell. The last session being really very technical. So in terms of the journey of turning a concept into something tangible, we've got something more to show and talk through now. So first proper slide, I'm going to talk through the first couple of slides around the Pathfinder design, and then before handing over to Martin, he's got some schematics, etc. And then it'll be back to me for a couple of slides showing the very high level dashboards that we've been able to produce. So just in terms of how we're tracking against our outcomes, the first is around our data flows, learning about Power BI, which has been new to us as an organisation, and the setup and working up potential designs for the finished prototype and what that might look like, and also the future concepts ready for any stage 2 of our project, kind of life beyond Pathfinder, if you like. The next slide, please. So in terms of our system requirements, quite a big update here, I suppose, in that we've successfully shared prototype dashboards amongst our technical team. So I suppose more on that later when we come back to me. But it's now the case that we can see our real world application of this data. So it's quite exciting from our perspective as planners. Now we've worked through that technical stuff. So we've worked through the different software setup options and considered the impacts on our systems. with our technical team. So we've had regular technical meetings and posed lots of different questions around what that will mean for how our systems work when we roll it out to the whole team, hopefully in the future. So Martin will run through that final design in a moment. But ultimately, we are aware that there are a number of options, but the focus of our Pathfinder has been on Power BI. Great to hear from Nottingham in terms of what they've done following really the Esri path and how they've made that work, which is quite different from how we've worked through the Power BI model. Obviously, in terms of our final output and for the future, we'll report and document our journey and the value of what we found and highlight the technical design. So I suppose on that front, it's over to Martin to run through some of the schematics of the design and talk through the prototype development before coming back to me to talk about just how useful these dashboards are immediately looking like they will be to us. So Martin, over to you.
Thanks, Greg. I'm not going to dwell too much on the technicalities of this, but traditionally as an IDOCS council, we would be using Access database to extract information from the IDOCS database, which is held in Oracle. What we've done in what we're calling the Pathfinder design, which is where we are today, we're using someone with the ability to use Power BI desktop to build a report for us, which we've then been able to share via the Power BI service to, not in this case officers, etc., but to the rest of our technical team who have now got Power BI Pro licenses, which enable us to actually see those dashboards. And they're active, of course, you know, and you know, people can drill down within the dashboard itself, and indeed you can access them via Microsoft Teams, where you can put the Power BI app in as well. So it actually makes it a quite convenient way of accessing the data when you get to see it. But as I say, this is the design we have today. We think that technically this is fairly flawed. So we actually we are going to propose a more final design. And if I could have the next slide, please. Where we employ Power BI Gateway. This is another facility in the sort of the Power BI family, a bit like the FME server that Laura was talking about just now. This gives us the ability to design extracts and have them scheduled to refresh regularly. And then when the dashboards are looking at that extract, of course, they're looking at updated data. So our Pathfinder design is flawed in the sense that it's not all automatically hooked together, but the use of Power BI Gateway would be. It is still put together in very much the same way, using desktop to create a dashboard and Pro and via the Power BI app to view those dashboards. I would say here, however, as Greg mentioned, we're pretty early on in our business intelligence sort of journey, and it's been pointed out to us internally that Power BI isn't the only way of achieving this. And indeed, as they are in Nottingham, we're also will potentially be looking at the use of FME Server and Esri as an alternative to Power BI. However, our requirement was to do something with Power BI, and we are actually doing that and using that. But that would be more a council decision on where we go, rather than a decision to be made in the planning department. Okay, next slide, please. I can't remember if this is yours or mine, Greg, but I'll do this and hand over to you. What we've decided to do, because we felt we had a little bit extra time, more than we thought we have, we've been holding some workshops with people to get some requirements for what those dashboards ought to show. And we're focusing very hard on performance and things related to improving the success of the achievement of completing in the time required. So we've created a prototype dashboard which is fairly rough and ready at the moment, but it does illustrate the benefit of using Power BI or a similar tool to monitor performance. And we are hoping that demonstration, we can actually give a much sort of fuller demonstration of that dashboard at the next show and tell. And back over to you, Greg, for the final couple of slides.
Thanks, Martin. So this is the first of our dashboards. It's a performance dashboard. It's obviously in a prototype form, so it's not been put into the kind of graphic friendly scheme that we saw in Nottingham, for example. But this is really very much the key dashboard we were looking to develop, really. Designed to reflect our performance against the government designation criteria. So as you can see from the third pie chart in particular, we find ourselves in a unusual for us and an unfortunately perilous position for other minor applications added together going back to October 2020. Obviously in the heart of the pandemic, the increase in applications of about 20%. It's a staff sickness and team vacancies as well. So using that October 2020 period for government designation, we've produced these different pie charts. So we're above the major performance quite generously, but as you can see, we're marginally below for minors and others added together. Actually, it's the fourth chart, isn't it? By a couple of percent. So we're getting on top of that now with good internal support, but really part of a driver for our concept in the first place was around the lack of immediate accessible data for us to actually see where we were on any given day, in a kind of pretty archaic way, really. What we had to do previously, as Martin says, was run an access report for other applications, an access report for minor applications, set a date range for that, add the output together, type it into a calculator, get the average, and then repeat this. And every single time anybody wanted to run a report, or every day you wanted to update that for every person that wanted to run it. Obviously, you wouldn't know if somebody else in the team might have just run it. And that's obviously for just one data set, so it's fairly archaic. It wasn't perfect either, because the access reports weren't set up with all the Q codes that were the right Q codes for the government returns. It was just everything that we do. So whilst this dashboard that we've got there, it does need refinement, it's certainly got to a pretty usable place at the moment. It's not completely accurate, but I suppose that's part and parcel of the Pathfinder, because it doesn't include all years at the moment. It just goes back to 2020, but it's certainly more accurate than our access reports. So I suppose in short, we can now see pretty much at the click of a button what our performance indicators are. They're going in the right direction as well. We can see and monitor that, and we'll be getting above that 70% mark, hopefully fairly shortly, with the constant current improvement that we've got. I think really it highlights the whole benefit of the Pathfinder project for us, that this accessibility to the information and the visualization of it is really very significant improvement to us in our team, in terms of our management of that data and our ease of access to that data, and pretty starkly in contrast to our previous approach. Next slide, please. I think this is our last slide. So this last one's just a display of how we can, another way we can show some data where previously, so this shows the number of days until a target date for different applications that we've got on hand. So this was actually last week, so this was the number of the first column was the number of applications that we had expiring on that day. So there'll be on the Wednesday. The next one was the number of applications expiring on a Thursday, and the next one was those expiring on Friday. It's probably all councils come across as people extend them to Friday, and a couple of days gap, which is weekends, and then you can see the distribution across the following week, and the different colours then representing different case officers and how many applications they have expiring on that day. So we now can now again a click of a button, and again needs some refinement, but we can now see what's coming up for the week, either for the case officers themselves, for us as sign-off officers, for our administration team, kind of when it comes to them knowing what decisions they've got to issue. Obviously that's useful for cross-referencing with the leave calendar as well for any given day in particular, so we can see where we're going to have issues with getting decisions out, or sign-off officers, enough sign-off officers to pick up on the number of decisions coming through. And in terms of the kind of the case management, which officers these peaks in workflow really relate to. As I said, unsurprisingly, that often tends to be a Friday. Again, just like the previous slide, this is real world data for us in the planning team. And something I've shown in others to others in the team, to much acclaim from them really. I think it's we've done a few dashboards, but I think there are huge possibilities for what we can do that we haven't been able to do through the Pathfinder project. The number of dashboards that we've kind of identified that you might do at stage 2 are quite significant, and all of those will help us manage and monitor our workload and performance. As Martin said, and as Nottingham have done, whether that's through Power BI or some other dashboard system like Esri, remains to be seen. So yeah, that's it from us. I suppose until the final show and tell now, where, as Martin said, we'll look to present the outcomes of our final report and hopefully work out how we can display and run through our prototype dashboard live.
That's great. So thanks, Greg and Martin. We've got Havering next, but any burning questions for Greg and Martin before that? All right, so there will be time for Q&As at the end if anyone wants to stick around. We are looking to finish well on time, so that's great. Havering, towards the end of your presentation, you're asking us to show a video for you. We're happy to do that, but we're going to have to switch over presenters. It's going to be a little bit hammy. So if you can kind of introduce the video when that slide appears, that will give us time to do a little switch over. And if you've got no video introduction, I'll tell a joke. All right, take it away.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you very much, team. Hi, everyone. My name is Giorgia Manzana. I'm a user experience designer in the digital portfolio team at Havering, and I'm here today with my colleagues Matthew Riedel, who is the project lead, as well as our content designer Claire Black. Both of my colleagues are on the call, and they might contribute to the presentation today. So just to recap from where we were left things from the last presentation, from the last show and tell, we are continue organizing our work by having weekly stand-up with all project members involved, but also with key stakeholders from the service. We continue organizing our work by having a sprint planning and also reflecting on progress we are making using sprint retro, just to, of course, understand key learnings and also what went well, what didn't work well, and of course, keep iterating and making improvements. Just to recap from the last session, we have two main streams from this project. One is around introducing Power BI and allowing the service to better create reports by using the Power BI dashboards, but also we are streamlining our pre-application advice process because, just as a reminder from what we presented last time, our process currently is paper-based and requires a lot of time from our customer services team to make make appointments, to organize the bookings, etc., etc. Now, I'm not going to expand more on this. Where you see around server migration, one of the things we've discussed previously is before we were able to do anything on Power BI, we had to do a document cleansing exercise just to understand really what are the reports, what are the documents really that currently being used by the service. We had to rewrite some of these reports, and as part of this, then we were able to start during our server migration. We were able to be able to use these reports, these documents in Power BI. Now, in our Power BI, what is the update? We have built up a data set. We have about 5 rounds of iterations so far in terms of the data models that were created by our Power BI specialist. And we also started rebuilding the old Osella reports. There were about 100 of them in Power BI, where we were able to use the new data set. And over the next couple of slides, we have some quick, wireframes to show you how Power BI dashboards look at the moment. Now, in terms of our pre-application process, we were able to make progress with our bookings and payments. We were able to integrate with the team calendar in Outlook, which means now every time a customer will be making a booking, that would be shown straight away onto the team's calendar, and so they will know exactly which appointments are available, which officers will need to take up appointments, etc., etc. And also our developer is currently working on our payments page, and we are doing a payment integration with Civica, which is the payment system that's being used widely by our council. So next slide, please. So here, as I said, we have the two wireframes from our Power BI dashboard. Again, we removed any personal information from our customers, but that's just to give you an overview of what our Power BI dashboard will look like. And we have on the next slide another wireframe again showcasing some of our work. Hopefully, at our next session, we will invite our Power BI specialists to expand a bit more on how they are working on how they are creating the Power BI dashboards, how we develop the data models. So any key learnings that we will be able to share with all of you. On to the next slide, please. Thank you. And just before I describe what you see here on the web page, the next slide will be the video. So Tim, if you want to start getting ready, that would be great. Thank you. Now, in terms of what we are doing, because this is going to be a form that has about 6 or 7 steps, depending on which journey the customer will follow. In that scenario, we wanted to ensure that before our customer starts using the form, they have clear information on what the form is about, but what are the documents, what are the information that they need to have in hand before they start. And based on best practices from government digital services, we were able to design a before you start page to ensure that the user, the customer, will know exactly what are the main areas that they need to consider, or what are the documents that they need to have in hand before they proceed into a form that will take them about 15 minutes to complete. And on to the next slide, which is our video. Thank you. Sorry, Tim, I think there has to be a sound as well.
Yeah, I'm sure Michael's trying to work out the sound as we go, and if we can't get the sound, this is always the problem with we're having with Teams, is getting the sound to share on the videos. So we've given it to a colleague. If he doesn't sort this out in a few minutes, he's fired.
Sure. So just to then briefly explain maybe what people will. Last time we presented to all of you our initial mock-up, our wireframes of what our journey will look like when a customer is going to complete a pre-planning advice application form. Now, our developer was able to build this form into our Power Apps. We're using Power Apps portal.
Hi everyone, my name is Claire and I'm going to give you a quick demo of Haveren's
Great. So we are ready. Thank you. And so what we are presenting today is, of course, still in the dev environment, but you will be able to see a clickable prototype of what the form will look like to a user. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Claire and I'm going to give you a quick demo of Haveren's pre-planning application advice service form that we've been working on. So the scenario is I'm a Haveren resident and I would like to submit an application for a loft conversion. So I'm going to walk you through the 7 steps of our form. So step 1 is what type of development would you like advice about? So I'm going to click on more details. So here it just gives me a brief summary of what all the options entail. And the first option is exactly what I need. So I'm going to click on householder and scroll down to continue. So which service would I like? So for householders, we have 2 options. We've got the telephone advice service. And when you click on the option, you have a little drop down with a summary of what is included in that service. And the other option is written advice. So in this case, I will go for the telephone advice service because I really want to talk to somebody about my potential loft conversion. So I click continue. Okay, so now I need to schedule an appointment. Actually, I'd really like an appointment on Wednesday, and 10:30 is perfect. So I'm going to select that and choose continue. Okay, so step 4, am I an applicant or an agent? So I am an applicant and I'm just going to enter in some details here. Put in my mobile phone number quickly and just a test email address and first line of the address. And I'm going to put in the postcode RM13BB. Okay, and I'm going to continue. Okay, step 5 is I need to give the postcode and address details of the site. So in my particular case, it will be the same as my home address. So I'm just going to enter that again. And step 6, I have the opportunity for me to describe the proposed development in some more detail. And here we've got an example of how that could look. And then I also can upload the required documents right here as well. So I'm just going to type in quickly that I would like a loft conversion with a dormer. And then I am going to upload the first required document, which is a site location plan. And they've given me an example of how that needs to look, which is great. So I am going to browse and attach my site location plan and upload that. And you can see we've got other options here of other documents that can be attached to support the application as well. And I'm going to go to continue. Okay, so step 7 is a summary of my application. So you've got all the details that I entered, a reminder of how much this is going to cost. I've got details of my appointment, and my applicant details, as well as the location of the site. And now I've got the option to pay online. So that completes the demo. I hope you found it helpful. Thank you for your time. And I'll just hand over to Matt and Georgia to continue the show and tell.
Thank you, Claire, since you're on the call today. That completed the demonstration of our initial prototype. We are still working and making iterations to our form. Again, hopefully during the next and final session, we will come back with our final design and our final MVP. As Matthew mentioned in the comments, we utilized the examples for the site location plans from Buckinghamshire, and that they shared the example with us through local digital. So that was great for us to use it as part of our forms. Matthew, is there anything else that you would like to add?
Yeah, so the Power App form that we've just shown you there, that's built in the Dynamics 365 suite, and which our developer is working on our payment integration with Civica Pay for, and also the integration through dynamic scheduling into a Microsoft Outlook calendar for the team to be able to pick up the bookings, and also the customer will be able to reschedule as well through a link in the confirmation email they'll get, is obviously what sits on our side. And then on the seller, the supplier side, they are building the integration through a JSON file that will come out for the D365 data to land in a seller for the planning officers to pick up a workflow, and also pass the files from the customer to our document management system, which is Civica 360. So we're just working on, we've provided an interface spec, and we're looking at a spec to be provided for a seller to commence that work as soon as possible. And we've asked for a maximum time frame, and it looks like up to 4 weeks. So bearing in mind we've got to do full UAT and do our governance and go to our technology design authority, it is probably looking quite challenging for our MVP to go live for the final, certainly for the final show and tell. So just to flag that, but we're going to try to make it possible and get the MVP live, fully integrated by the final week of the project. Yeah.
Fantastic. All right. Any burning questions for Havering before we move on to our final presenter, which is North Devon? Great. So Matt, if you're able to flash up the slides again, and North Devon, take it away.
Oh, thank you, Tim. Good afternoon, everybody. If I can just go to the first and second slide. So my name's Nina Lake, work for North Devon Council, and I've also brought my colleague along, Paul Trod, who's our analyst programmer and acting as a senior supplier as part of this Pathfinder project, and here to answer any of those technical questions, which I can assure you I will not be able to answer. I just wanted to give you a quick refresh on our vision, which hasn't changed, and that was to work with our supplier DEF to translate a clean end-to-end 2B Section 106 process into a live system environment, tested and accepted by all system users, and once live, shared widely with all interested stakeholders. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the aim of the Pathfinder was to take a very complicated as-is Section 106 process and turn this into a much leaner model, automating as many of those processes as possible. So we'll be able to pull things in as planning history, local plan policies and spatial layers all into one system, whereas in our as-is process at the moment, as I've described before, we've got lots of access and spreadsheets and databases all being contributed and really not having a very clean system at all. Next slide, please. So our objectives also remain the same, just to have a clean process, that everybody's able to contribute to the process and have one repository in which to report from. We've also gone further into our healer process, which is really timely as we've just done a soft launch for our local plan review. A healer, for those of you who don't know what that is, it's a housing and economic land availability assessment, which is a technical and theoretical assessment of sites that could potentially come forward for housing or economic employment land. We want our Pathfinder to enable us to produce reports for government in a timely fashion, and also to be able to share with fellow deaf users and the wider community if that's helpful at all. Next slide, please. We've shown this slide a couple of times, so yeah, we're still in our delivery development phase. Next slide, please. So we've got this wide-ranging process which we're looking at, and we've had to put this down into phases. The first phase is refining some of those elements that we've already got in the system, and the second phase we thought was going to be looking at a new healer module. At the moment, Paul does this on an access database for our colleagues in planning policy. Paul wrote a detailed specification, but when our supplier DEF actually looked at it, they said that they felt that the policy monitoring module that they've got, would actually meet our needs. So it was really refreshing that they'd really taken time to understand our requirements. They just didn't say, oh yeah, we'll develop what you want. They've really thought about it, really considered our needs, and that trusted relationship has really been helpful in this process. Next slide, please. So what have we been doing? Like I say, our second phase is drilling down into the healer process, and as part of the additional benefits have also come shining through. So we'll be able to provide the annual brownfield site register. We'll be able to provide more information on the self-build register. Paul and I were talking earlier today, and also saying that this will actually enable us to produce the annual land availability outturn. So we started off thinking we were going to have one or two solutions, and as we're going through this process, additional benefits are shining through, which is really, really helpful. And also, once we've got our lean and agile process mapping tool, which was part of our ask as part of this Pathfinder, that's going to enable us to calculate those efficiencies as well. Thank you. Next slide. So we're going to be moving into UAT very shortly. Paul's been loading some of our data, 5 key test applications on MasterGov, and that testing, that first key phase, is going to start in April. That one team approach has really helped wrap that team around a problem, really. We've got legal, housing, development management, open space and planning policy all going to be part of that user testing, all feeding back, making sure those links and those triggers are worked up really well. And it's really nice actually when you engage with people in a problem, how many people are willing to come to the table and be part of that solution finding. So that's been really refreshing also. Next slide, please. So the next phase, to wrap up our Pathfinder, our suppliers very kindly said that he's going to come along to the final call. I think somebody else said that their developer, I think it was iDocs, were also willing to do this. So he's going to come along, Graham, and talk about the work we've been doing, talk about the benefits that have come through, talking about how this could help districts and also county with their housing monitoring. So we're excited that Graham's accepted that challenge. Next slide, please. And this is a bit of an old slide, so I won't go through that, but there's still multiple outcomes that we're hoping for. And the last slide just says thank you and any questions. And Paul, I'm not sure if there's anything you wish to add or whether we'll wait to just see if any questions come through.
No, Nina, I think you covered everything there. If there's any questions, then I'm here to answer any of those.
Thanks, Paul.
Fantastic. Yes, well, any questions for Nina and Paul before we open the floor for questions for anyone? All right, I'll wrap this up and then we will have a Q&A. So if the people who've presented can just stick around in case we do have anything, I'll quickly get to you. So we will send out an email after this, just reminding you of the final showcase date, which is the 26th of April. And we'll also link you to their blog posts on Medium. The final reports will be published early May. Next slide. So if those who presented want to turn their cameras on and give us a little wave, and if anyone has any questions for them, or if any of the presenters want to ask any questions to the other presenters, just unmute your mic and give a little wave and ask away. Or you can put it in the chat and I'll ask it for you. It's my final offer. All right, I am hearing a lot of stony silence, so I'm going to let you all have 28 minutes of your life back. This has been really cool. Thanks so much. I really enjoyed this, despite the slight technical hitches. Really looking forward to the final showcases, because there's been a lot of progress that's been made before between here and the last show and tell. So I really appreciate that. Thanks everyone for presenting, and thanks everyone for coming along.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Bye now.
Bye bye.